It's a very quick one from me. Just thanks everyone again for joining tonight. We're very grateful to have Lisa Ware from the CPSU, and for those that we're orienteering, so we're used to short acronyms for names, but for those not aware, it's Child Protection Sport Unit. And yeah, Lisa's going to be going through safe events. It's not going to be quite as long as the usual course that this one is, otherwise we'd be here till probably the early hours. We could do that, but I'm sure there's a few that have got better things to do later on. But no, thanks for some really interesting content to come up, and then I've got some very brief updates at the end for everyone. But first of all, for now I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thanks very much, Peter. Hi everybody. It's very weird me just kind of talking to Peter, because Peter has to listen to me a lot because I can only see Peter's face at the minute. So it's weird having everybody's cameras off, but I understand from a tech perspective. Joe, I hope it's okay, because I'm somebody that likes to engage with people. So for me, it would be great to get some audience participation, because really nobody wants to listen to me ramble on for I think I've got about 45 minutes, Peter, haven't I? So if people, want to raise their hand, open mic, I'm good for that, and I would definitely encourage that. So just a little bit about myself. So Lisa Ware, senior consultant. I am the link from the Child Protection in Sport Unit, which is a team in the NSPCC, and I link in with Peter and British Orienteering and support you as an organisation with your safeguarding arrangements. And one of those things that we do is we have an annual catch up with Peter and colleagues just to see how things are going, offer any support and any help that they might need over the forthcoming year. And this was one of the things that Peter identified as an area to support you as welfare officers, club chairs, whatever other role that you might have within your clubs, to be able to support you in your role in thinking about safeguarding children and young people during your events. And Peter had the privilege of spending a whole morning, maybe not privilege, I don't know, maybe it was purgatory, listening to me as we were going around the woods of Pendle Hill, doing an orienteering course. So I've been fully immersed into what actually the sport of orienteering is like, and I had a lovely time with Peter and meeting loads of families and children as we went around, and just some things that it made me think about when I was pulling this briefing together. So in terms of the NSPCC and Child Protection Unit, we've been around for about 21 years, and we started following some child protection concerns, so sexual abuse that was happening within swimming in the elite side of swimming. And Sport England approached the NSPCC as a main charity in this space to see if they could form a partnership, and that partnership has lasted for over 20 years, and we now cover England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and we also get funding from UK Sport as well. So we cover quite a lot of the United Kingdom, and we help quite a lot of British bodies and the high performance sector, as well as grassroots side of things as well. So that's just a little bit more about our team. So one of the things for me is I always think it's really important that we start with the individuals that we've got on the call. So because we're talking about event safeguarding, I'm not going to go into details around child abuse or serious safeguarding concerns. I'm going to talk to you about planning for that and what things to take into consideration when you're thinking about setting up an event, a competition, or an activity that you do on quite frequently with your club nights and club days. But for me, I always think it's important that we start with you. And I always think the most important person in my life is me. And I know that sounds really selfish, but if I'm not looking after me, I can't possibly be there looking after anybody else as well. So I don't know who we've got in the room. So as a trauma-informed organisation, it's always important for us to be able to make sure that people know where to go to if they need any help and support themselves, because something's triggered them in terms of a memory, something to do with themselves, something they experienced as a child, or it might be that the worries or concerns about a child that they know currently. So we put up the NSPCC helpline number there to make sure that if anybody does have anything that's affected them, that they've got somewhere to go go with that. But also, if you're worried about a child within your club as well, obviously you've got Peter to be able to speak to, but also you can signpost children and young people to Childline as well, because we know that there's a mental health crisis out there for children and young people, and we want to make sure that they're safeguarding their mental health and well-being, and we have trained counsellors that are on that service for young people. So as an organisation that is very much embedded within equality, diversity and inclusion, for us, making sure that, on the call today, that we're treating everybody equally, we're thinking about discrimination and we're trying to eliminate that. We're making sure that we're providing equality of opportunities for people, thinking about fairness and inclusive practices as well. And for us to be thinking about our own commitment towards ED&I, and for us to be able to challenge our own biases, whether it be unconscious or explicit, and for us to be able to challenge each other if somebody says anything inappropriate this evening, and then maybe Peter would be able to pick that up with an individual and offer some further support to that individual if necessary. So just going to start off with a video. So Michelle, who's is going to speak on this short video now, is my line manager. So she's the director of Child Protection and Sport Unit. She's been around in the team for probably about 10 years now, and very experienced in safeguarding events. So just to give my voice a rest and give you your ears a rest from me, just going to give another voice on the call. So hopefully the sound works. We had a few technical problems before, but hopefully this works, and hopefully Peter and Joe are on standby if not. Are you getting the music, Peter? Not working again. It is
about planning. Safeguarding has to be part of it at the very beginning. I think the second one is around identifying the different partners that are going to be involved. So you will have organisers and participants, but you'll also have volunteers or clubs, national governing bodies, or leisure facilities. We need to identify all those different groups. And the third top tip will be, how do we communicate with those different groups in a successful way? There's a whole heap of resources on the CPSU website for people running events. There's an online tool that people can use where you can put your level of event from grassroots to an international event, and it will bring up the safeguarding considerations that are key for those different levels. So it could be for the international travel or overnight stays, or for the more kind of informal events, it might be photography or code of conduct, or how do you keep people safe on public land.
So I'm just going to pick up on a few things that Michelle said there. So this is an older video, and she's absolutely right on the video. There's loads and loads of resources on the Child Protection and Sport Unit website. So if you just put in the CPSU, don't put in CPSU, because you'll get the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which is not the same thing as our CPSU. So if you just put in the CPSU, and if you put in your Google search or whichever safeguarding, whichever search engine you use, events, safeguarding, it should take you straight to the events tool. And there's lots of different levels that you can look at, and there's templates in there as well, and resources that you'll be able to download yourself to be able to enable you to get more informed in that area. One of the things since that video was made is we've worked with our colleagues in the wider NSPCC as well, and we've got a online safeguarding event online training that you can do, and I think the cost is probably about £25 as well if people are interested in further information around event safeguarding. So just giving you an opportunity to think about yourselves. I didn't know how this was going to be run today, so when I was developing my slides and stuff, I kind of envisage maybe some opportunities for breakout rooms, but I don't think we have that on Zoom. But what would be really great is maybe if you could just take a little minute to think about, when you run your last event, and it could have just been a club night event, it could have been a bigger competition, maybe you're doing counties or regionals, or it literally could have just been a club night event. And having been to one of them, I know what they look like. I want you to think about, from a safeguarding perspective, what you think went well and what wasn't so good, and maybe what you would do differently. So I'll just give you a little minute to think about that, and maybe either you can, somebody wants to raise a hand and come in there, or if people want to pop it in the chat, maybe what went well from a safeguarding perspective, or maybe some things that they now look back at and think, oh, maybe we could have done that bit differently, and that's absolutely fine, because I always think about the fact that we're on a learning curve with safeguarding. The landscape has changed so much. So I'll just give you as a little second just to think about that. That'll be fantastic if people could just pop in there. And if anybody wants to be brave, please raise your hand, and if not, I might just ask Peter from a club perspective of Peter's club, from his perspective, if anything in his club went well or something that he thinks that they might change. Anybody brave? Go on, Peter. You know some of the people on the call. You might think, oh, there's somebody really good there that you think, oh, I don't know, Liz or Nikki or Lucy. You might think, oh, they're really good. They're chatty people. They might not worry about being on the mic.
Yes, I know. I could just see the last one, Nikki Howard there. So I wonder whether she's got it able to unmute, or whether Joe needs to unmute people. But I think you should be able to unmute. But no, there's a few good people in there that I'm sure might stick their hands up. But we'll have a think. If we're not going to pick any.
I have unmuted myself.
Oh, there
Who
we
is
go.
that?
Hiya. I think.
My name's Nikki Howard. I work for the
Nikki.
SOA and Moravian Orienteers up north. The only thing that came to mind is potentially, and something we in Scotland are looking at, is providing a safe space for the children to wait while their parents are orienteering still.
Do you know what, Nikki? This is Peter's laughing because this actually happened when we went to Pendle, and I think that Nikki, this was one of the things that I wanted to be able to pull out of the discussions, and I think that that's a fantastic thing, Nikki, around thinking about, well, what do we do when, I don't know, what course were we were doing I don't know, one of the kids was doing a yellow course, dad was on the blue course, the young person, the 10-year-old finished before dad, and the young person was just hanging about, wasn't she? So Nikki, you can keep yourself unmuted. Is that the type of thing that you're thinking about?
Yes, we have in our development budget this year, we are buying a tent, and we are empowering our young leaders to monitor the tent and make sure that everybody's looked after. Social, it's part of our get kids involved, make more social, meet friends policy as well.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like a really lovely use of resources and empowering young people to look after other young people as well. And have you thought about like, you know, who, if one of your young ambassadors, your young leaders, getting them to go and sign those children in back into the, will the young person go back to the station and just say, yeah, I'm here, and we'll take them into the tent? Or have you thought about any of that type of stuff, Nikki?
I think we were initial thoughts were that we would leave it very much up to the parents' discretion to agree with their children what they would want to do, because you don't want to force kids into having to go and wait somewhere they're not comfortable with. Yeah. It might be that they're not that sociable, but we thought from our point of view what we could provide was a space. So, and well, the young leaders are trained, so they've done a basic sort of coaching foundation, so they should be able to, if we give them, empower them and have somebody watching, but just then the kids to monitor what's going on and ensure that there's nothing of concern, and to make sure they're looking out for people. Were our initial thoughts, if we make it slightly more formal with a sign in, sign out, that it has, we were concerned about some problems in terms of what if somebody just wandered off, people weren't signing, you know, parents came and got without, it then becomes slightly more, I don't know, from our,
And I think for me, I think it's about trying to find a solution. So what you've done, Nikki, is fantastic. You've identified a gap. You've thought, actually, this could be a flashpoint. So I always think about whenever I'm doing event safeguarding, is think about where are your additional vulnerabilities, where are those vulnerabilities in your processes that you've got. So one of the things for me is thinking about pickups and drop-offs. That's always an area where we can lose kids. And you've clearly identified a need within your club and thought about how can we problem solve around it. And what you might do, Nick, is you might try that out for a period of time, and you might end up tweaking it and making changes to it because you think, oh, that bit worked, that bit didn't work. And I think for me, I think it's about being dynamic with whatever you're doing, to be thinking about what measures can we put in to make better decisions to make sure our young people are safe and looked after during the time that they are with us. So even though parents are off running and they've got they've got parental responsibility, at that moment they've left those children in your care, really. You've got a duty of care in that moment, in that period of time while that young person's doing that event, to make sure that that young person's as safe as possible. And one of the things is about, you know, making sure that we've got processes in place where we know which kids are out on the course, which kids are coming back, what do we do if a child's got lost, that's part of orienteering. You're giving somebody a map and asking them to go and not get lost in the woods, but for them to go and figure their way back to, so they're no longer lost in the woods. So what type of things would we put in place to make sure that our young people are safe in that particular activity? So that's a really great example, Nikki. Thank you.
So I know we discussed, didn't we, about obviously with my club that's on a smaller scale, and we don't have many juniors, but the juniors do a similar situation where the parents will go out and have a run, and the juniors have been not left, but they're within the organiser's tent and they're busy helping with the SI registration or something. We find them a job to do, and they engage that way, and it's been really productive, supportive for us, obviously, at the event. But as well, it obviously frees up the parents to go out and knows that the kid's actually going to be doing something rather than just sat there
that's when they
getting
get up
bored.
to mischief, isn't it? when they're sitting around doing nothing. So I think that's great, again, empowering young people to develop skills that they wouldn't get that given that responsibility in other settings. So I think that's a really good way. And I think for me, just having somebody around at the event or your club night who's going to keep that extra eye on children and young people who come back, who finish before their parents, and they're just milling about. So, you know, kind of getting them to help clear up, or collecting cones, whatever it might be, to help and support you to keep them occupied until their parents get back. But I think it's about being vigilant about the fact that we've got some children and young people that might wander off and might think that they know somebody, and you know, somebody's maybe taking advantage of that. So I think that that's some really good examples of what people could do to make their event or club night safer for the young people. So I'm just going to move us on. So one of the things for me, Michelle mentioned about planning on the video. So I've got a bit of a slide there, but maybe if people, again, either want to unmute or pop it in the chat, please. It's an interactive session. I don't just do talking at people. So please pop in the chat what type of things you think is really important as organisers of club nights, of competitions, for you to be planning about when we're thinking about safeguarding children and young people. So what things might be part of your planning process when we're thinking about safeguarding children? And it's not about having right or wrong answers. You know, please don't be thinking it's, you know, a no sport competition. But for me, it's just about to help facilitate some conversation around this area. So if you could just pop some things in the chat, that would be lovely. So what do you think you need to plan about when we're thinking about safeguarding children for any events that you're running?
Let's see, there's a few with regard to planning events. So I'm just seeing if anyone's going to drop anything in there before I come in. There we go. I've got a few
Nikki's on it. Thank you, Nikki and Faye. So we've got risk assessment, we've got PVG, so safer recruitment, making sure that we've got this side of the board that it's DBS checks. Up north, it's PVGs. That's fantastic. Thank you, Nikki and Faye. Anybody else?
I think Faye makes just following expanding on Faye's, the risk assessment was what actually happened at Pendle Forest with our visit as well, in making sure it's the dynamic risk assessment, in that the yellow course they had there on the day, the maps ended up all having to be manually changed because it was so wet that it wasn't safe. So it's a safeguarding, but it's a safety issue as well. And lots of people, it hasn't come in yet, but we're looking at the different courses that are planned and what's the responsibility within the planning of them to make sure that the courses themselves are actually safe as they're going around and not crossing the main roads. It may seem like, well, that's something that we do all the time, but it's important that we don't forget the key facts like that we're not putting them at safety risk from other things. Safeguarding is obviously so much more than what a lot of people sometimes think it is.
Absolutely, Peter. We've got a few more. So young persons finish near assembly, so they don't have a long route back. Absolutely, Karen, and I think that that's really essential, because then again, that's another thing. So it's health and safety and safeguarding as well at the same time. You'll know then which kids have come back, how long it should take somebody-ish to do a course, and whether then you have to go out and look for them. So if it's close to the finish, it means then the children can be able to, maybe when they see it there, in their eyesight, they've got it, they can run over to it. So that kind of reassure them there as well. So Lindsay, make sure children do a course suitable for their skills, 100%, because the last thing that we want is somebody getting lost, going off course, doing more complex routes than they've got the skills for. So even, we talk about that in lots of other sports, maybe about the competitors that they would be playing against. So if we're thinking about boxing, for example, very easy one to think about, you would match children up with levels of experience and levels of weight category. And here what you're doing is you're matching up the child with the level of skill that they need for the course that they're particularly doing. So I think that that's a really good shout. Ali's talking about urban areas have different risks than rural. 100%, Ali. I don't know whether you want to elaborate on that, but definitely, it is a very different risk assessment that you'd be looking at when you were in a rural area. Yeah, so I think, if you want to unmute, Ali, you're more than welcome to unmute or pop some more information into the chat. Don't have to, no pressure. But that would be really lovely to hear your views on urban events. We talk about that sometimes, Peter, don't we, when we get on a call, and you talk to me about what's going on in Greater Manchester and your urban events that you're doing.
Yes, yeah, it was. Well, we had a bit of snow last week to contend with, but
Really?
they checked it at lunchtime and it was all good. And to be fair, it was all perfectly safe when we went out running in the evening. But yeah, the evening ones are very. You see everything saying about under 16s need an adult to run with them and to go out through there. There was a night park event. It wasn't an urban event, but it was a night park event the other week where there was a typical orange course. So again, for young lads and youngsters going on, but the parents were obviously going with them because it was on the moors. Again, the consideration of what the environment was as they were going round. So just to make sure that everybody's safe. Yes, just see what Ali's just added in there. Yeah.
Road safety, avoid areas with serious social problems, 100%. So I wouldn't be putting it through a park where that there's antisocial behaviour, or through an estate that you think actually this is a really dangerous part of town. So definitely be thinking about that. And that whole recce situation, go out and explore the environment yourself first. And I know as orienteers you'd be doing that, and I know that's probably common sense in your particular field, but definitely be thinking about going and having a look at the course. Is there any obstacles that you think either urban or rural that is going to be too dangerous for the young people that you're looking after? So new families with children starting with club, I don't really know what ability. Yeah, and I think it's about having a conversation, isn't it? So that was one of the things. So another Nikki, one of the things that struck me when I went out on the event with Peter was about how family orientated orienteering was, and that was lovely for me, getting young people away from screens, getting them active physically, and being in rural settings, being in terms of mindfulness and being in nature. I think for me that was an amazing opportunity. So for those families to be able to connect with their children, their lasting memories that they will leave for children. But 100%, Nikki, I think having those conversations with families early on, and maybe you might have somebody in your club who's a very friendly person. So I know in the place that I volunteer, we have key people who volunteer for certain things. So as you can imagine, I'm one of those meter and greeters, because I'm quite a friendly, I like to think I'm friendly. Peter might say something else, but I'm quite a happy, smiley person. So somebody that's friendly, that's approachable, that you can have a conversation with, get to find out a little bit if people have done orienteering before, get to know their skill level, and maybe it's a case of giving them a little bit of support as well along the way. So you've got a whole family being supported, and that will hopefully help people to come back. So that's about retention as well. because what we want to do is we want to grow our clubs, and we want people to think about our clubs being an inclusive and friendly and welcoming environment. So some really great points from people there. So I'm just going to pop up the Blue Peter, as I call it, slides. So these are just, this is not like an exhaustive list, but for me, whenever you're thinking about running an event, these would be the things that I would definitely be thinking about. So I would be thinking about, as I think it was Nikki said, about, you know, safer recruitment. What's your safer recruitment saying? Is the people who are volunteering, your coaches, your instructors, other volunteers as well, have they gone through the proper safer recruitment processes outlined by British Orienteering? I'd be thinking about supervision levels as well. So I think that's quite a hard thing for your type of activity, and your supervision might be a remote supervision. So how do we check in? And I can see Keith's put in there about geolocation tracking, and that might be one way to keep tracks, maybe using technology with young people around being able to know where they are. And yeah, for young people and old people, it's safe fun, but the sport does not give it much. And I think that's for you as an organisation to try and figure out, is this something that you can utilise, that technology, to be able to safeguard children and young people? So I think that's you know, something to explore further as an organisation. Thinking about things like, you know, we've already mentioned about risk assessments, who's in loco parentis. So when a parent runs off and does a blue run and we've got an orange run over here, who is now in loco parentis for that child? Have we got consent form signed from parents? Do we know if any of those kids have got allergies or medical needs? So even if that's only for 20 minutes while the parents, you know, just finishing off their run, you're still in loco parentis, and something could happen during that period of time where you'd maybe need to contact emergency services and let them know. One of the things for me is a big one is codes of conduct, because that's about how we all behave with each other, and having, so, you know, acceptable agreed standards of how we're all going to interact with each other. And that is, you know, not just the adults who are there in positions of trust and authority, but thinking about your participants, thinking about any spectators, thinking about your athletes as well who are taking part in that particular activity. So the next one that Michelle talked about was about thinking about our partners. So for you, you may or may not have partners so much, but maybe think about who you might partner up with, who might be partners in your particular activity. So it might be quite a complex one to people to think of, but actually some of you might just go, it's really clear. Who are our third party partners that we might work with? Who are the stakeholders also involved? So it's not just you as the club organisers, coaches, welfare officers, chairs. Who else do you engage with for your particular competition, your particular activity? So I'll just give you a minute to pop something into the chat there. Peter, have you got any thoughts on that while we're waiting for people to?
Oh, I've got a couple. I'm sure they'll pop through. I'm thinking of more the for me, when we do sort of family introductory sessions and working with it could be a local authority. Certainly if they've got a community day and go along and then run an orienteering activity or something along the side, then it's joining in with them. Yeah.
And I think something like you know, those big shows that they do, the rural shows and stuff like that, that might be you know, an opportunity that people get asked to come along to. Brilliant. Nikki, I'm going to start calling Nikki Quick Draw McGraw because Nikki's on it. I'm loving it. Fire coming off your fingertips, Nikki. Brilliant. So thank you for that. So active schools, forestry, land commission, scout, schools liaison, local activity groups. Does this cover a place which we use to host an event like a school? Absolutely. So thinking about your schools, your sites, local residents and other users of the countryside, I think that's a fantastic list that we've got there. So yeah, venue is in there, and your venue might be lots of different partner organisations as you've already listed there. It might be your NGB, so your NGB is your partner as well. It might be if you've put on if you're doing anything with schools, I've seen that, you know, that was one of the things that Nikki's put in there. So if you're working with schools to try and encourage people to get out and be in rural communities, you might be liaising with the schools, but there might also be transport providers as well that you're working with. Children, young people are your partners as well. So and your parents as well. So they're part of your partners that you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about any planning that you're doing around safeguarding and events. Your coaches and your instructors, your officials, and any other volunteers as well that you've got as part of your organisation. So yeah, and I'd really like phase things around local residents and other users of the countryside. Definitely, I think for you, you're going to be coming into contact with members of the public in those rural areas and sharing that space. And how do we share that space in a way that's respectful to everybody else? So for me, just thinking about those partnerships. So, you know, sometimes people go, oh my gosh, it's just not worth the effort of having partners. But I think for me, what it does is it you know, it increases our shared resources. It adds that value to what we are doing, and it builds capacity as well. So, you know, if you can do things in partnership with people, then, you know, you'll be able to increase the amount of volunteers that you might have, or increase the amount of resources that you might be able to access as well. So particularly if you're linking in with other organisations like Scouts, for example, that might then give you more opportunities to utilise their resources as well as your own resources. Other people will have different skills and knowledge. So I know, you know, from a safeguarding perspective, the Scouts have been on their journey, Scouts and Brownies and guides and stuff. They've got robust safeguarding arrangements as well. So it might be that they've got somebody that could take the lead in being the welfare officer for that particular event. And it might be, you know, they can support you as well. So it's a reciprocal relationship. So we need partners to have an event. I think we do. I think we need to have partners. Doesn't matter what type of event we're running at, even if it's just with our athletes, we need to have be thinking about the partners. So some of the challenges, so say if we were working with a school, we might need to think about whose safeguarding policy are we going to be using. So I wouldn't necessarily just rely on the fact that, oh, we're bringing, you know, we're working with a local high school, we're trying to get young people out of the city, into the rural communities, into the countryside to experience what an amazing sport that you have. Don't assume that you're just going to be using the school safeguarding policy. I'd have a conversation with them and just check in about where's your safeguarding policy start and stop, and when does the schools kick in. And you might want to draw up something that's an agreement for both of you coming together on that particular thing to say, well, actually, it's our particular event. You will follow your own safeguarding policy when you get back to school, but we need to follow our policy. And what I need to do is that there was an incident that happened. I need to let Peter know, because that's our processes within British Orienteering, or you need to log it on your club incident reports that you will have locally. So I think just clarifying that information beforehand, I think is really important. So yeah, who reports concerns, who follows up. So you know, somebody who does events, one of the things that I would do, so we have a big national event called UK School Games, and we have over 1,000 children that come to it, over 10 sports. So if there was something that, you know, we dealt with particularly there and then, that's fine, all boxed off. But if there was something that I felt needed following up with the national governing body of sport, post games, I would follow that up with, I don't know, cycling or triathlon, netball, and I would have that conversation. I'd follow it up with an email and just say, this happened. Have you followed your processes? So that's about me discharging my safeguarding responsibilities. I've checked in that the school or the governing body of sport has completed their safeguarding, followed their safeguarding policy, and done what was necessary. So I've now discharged my responsibility back to that organisation. And I think this is really important about thinking about, have we all got that same value base around safeguards? And so don't make an assumption that we're all on the same page. Just check it out. Think about what your values are in terms of safeguarding, and make sure that somebody's at that same level as well. Think about what standards as well. So again, if you're working in partnership with, particularly with maybe local activity groups, You will have your safeguarding standards as part of British Orienteering, which will include safer recruitment, training, coach qualifications. If you're working with a local activity group, they might not have that level of safeguarding training. They might not have that same level of safer recruitment processes. So I would have that discussion in advance, so I would know what you were working with and what measures you need to put in place to mitigate against any risks. And I think particularly for your sport, it's really important who calls off the activity. You know your sport best, so you will know what is an acceptable level of risk assessment in terms of particularly weather. Thinking about the weather, today is very, very stormy. You might go, actually, this is too dangerous today, and you're able to make that decision based on your skills, expertise, and knowledge in this area to say, actually, it's unsafe for us to do that. So who's going to call that off? So the last one that Michelle mentioned was around communication. So I'm just going to quickly, I'm really mindful of time, and as Peter knows, I can talk a lot, so I'm just going to whiz through these bits. So these are the things that I think that you should be communicating with your participants around these areas in advance as well. So, and it might be, if you're running club nights frequently, it might be making sure that on your website you've got access to things like your policies, your procedures, your codes of conduct, who to raise a concern with. So it might be that you've got your welfare officer, so you might have like a Facebook page, and it might be on that Facebook page you can put links to these things. It could be that you've got a nice picture of your welfare officer who's leading on anything that is welfare, wellbeing and safeguarding children and young people. And it might be that you're communicating all of these things in advance, or at the beginning of the season, or partway through the season as well, if you're running club nights. But if you're doing this as a bigger competition, maybe I would be, as part of that competition, like manual, if you like, is I would be putting all of this information out to people. So there would be a welfare plan that you would need to have that would include your codes of conduct, your safer recruitment processes, what things that you need to be thinking about in terms of safeguarding actually at the event. So we've talked about quite a lot of these things, but if I'm thinking about going back to school games, which is a large event over in Loughborough campus, Loughborough University, it's a massive campus, and we have to have all of these things boxed off. So for one of the things for me, going back to our value base, is about being child-centered. So if we're child-centered and we keep them at the heart of our decision-making processes, what's in the best interest of the children that come, whether you look at it as collectively as children or as a child, then we're going to get it right for everybody else. So we're thinking about, how are we going to keep these children safe during our activities? How are we going to make sure that they're having fun? How are they going to enjoy it? That they've got a voice within their club activity, for me, is really important. If we've got that child voice and that child value base at the centre of things, I don't think we're going to go wrong if we're coming from that position. We've already talked about that downtime. So as Nikki said before, what do we do when the kids are just, they finished their race, still waiting for parents? That for me is downtime. How are we going to keep that children occupied in that period of time? Because we know that, these are when young people go missing, or they get into mischief and cause themselves an injury, or potentially somebody could harm a child in that particular time. Thinking about your welfare leads, and I've just put, in terms of your policies and procedures, these are some of the things to consider when we're thinking about our policies and procedures. So having so case management, that would be over to Peter, and I think be supporting you with that case management. But if you've got a missing child protocol, what is that missing child protocol? Thinking about photography guidance, you're out in community settings, so it's a bit more restricted about what you can and you can't do legally around photography. Thinking about, all of the staff and volunteers involved in it, have they got, followed the necessary requirements of British Orienteering, and thinking about coming back to that recording process. So when something happens, that you've got a process to be able to record information locally within your clubs, and whatever needs to be shared relevantly with British Orienteering, you can do that. And we've already talked about that third party side of things. So for me, just thinking about, as an organisation, we have a duty of care to look after our our participants, whether it be children or adults. And it is that focus on health and safety, which I know as an orienteering club, you will be very hot on that. But we've also got that moral duty as well to look after the safety and welfare of children and young people. And we do have that higher level of care that we need to give to children and young people because they're under 18, and that vulnerability and that protected characteristic is because they're a child. So even if it's only for 15 minutes while that parent's off finishing the course, we've got that duty of care to look after that child in that moment. And we need to take reasonable steps like a parent would do to safeguard that child. And it is about recognising that legal and moral obligations as well, and taking that, you know, reasonable care to make sure at all times that child's safe in your care. So, Peter, I've got a bit of a video to show people.
Yes.
And I'm just conscious of time. Do you want me to show the video? Have we got time for that, or do we want?
Yes, I think we've got time. I've just had a look to see how many slides we've got. Yes, yeah, we've got time.
Is that all right? Cool. So we've got a bit of a scenario here around photography, which I know always comes up at all kinds of events. So I'm just going to show you this, and what I want you to think about is what would be some of the key considerations for you to think about in this particular safeguarding situation.
The athletics competition's in full swing now, and one of the parents has just told me that her daughter and a few of her mates are concerned about a guy who's been hanging around near their group all day. They're not sure if he's here to watch one of his own kids, and he's not wearing any accreditation, but he seems to be taking a lot of pictures of the girls. As always, we have our own photography guidance in place for the press, our event staff and athletes, but the sports centre is open to the public, even on finals day. I'm not sure what we can do about a member of the public taking pictures on a public site.
So this one that frequently comes up for within any event that we do. So I've even had that at school games myself, where we've had that situation happening. You know, it's an open campus, people can walk their dogs on there. And I'm sure you must have this in orienteering, where maybe you've had somebody walking around with a camera and they might be taking a picture of a woodpecker, which is lovely. People are out in nature, want to appreciate that. But you also might have seen something that made you like that little internal alarm bell. And I always think that we should listen to that internal alarm bell and respond accordingly. But what could we do in this situation where it's public land and you suspect that somebody's taking some pictures for nefarious reasons, not for legitimately taking pictures of nature? You're a bit worried about what they're actually doing, what they might do with those images. Any thoughts from people? So again, people can put the hand up, come off mic, or pop something in the chat, and you could even just ask questions around it, really.
I think you've got everyone with a slightly trickier one on this
one. I'm sure it must
think
happen in orienteering, Peter.
It does. I think if I cast my mind to certainly the major events, as you would expect at sort of any sporting event, you'll often see they'll have high-vis tops on that will say they're the official photographer going around. They might not have them on at other events, but at the smaller ones. But I won't. Someone's got their hand up, so I won't interrupt this one.
Is that Deirdre? Was it? It's gone. Name's gone.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. I can't actually use the chat, and I don't know whether it's because we're in Ireland. I'm with Orienteering Ireland.
So nice to meet you, Deirdre.
Hi, yes, and thanks. Actually, no, it's fantastic that we have access to this whole development conference. So thanks to British Orienteering for all that you are doing, and it's great being able to jump onto it. In relation to this, I think it's no issue to. I think whoever would be kind of overseeing, you know, the children's officer or the DLP of that event should be able to go up to that person and say, you know, sorry, you know, that this is making the girls feel uncomfortable. We have the children's interest in, we have to, you know, put their best interest first. So we just have to ask the person to not be taking the photographs. Like just doing a really simple thing like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you're right. I think we don't have a legal right to stop somebody taking images. But you're absolutely right, Deirdre. I think just going up and having a conversation is sometimes enough to make people go, oh, do you know what? I hadn't even thought about that. I'm really sorry. Or like what happened to us last time at school games, the person did a runner, which made me then question, well, what were they taking pictures of? They were taking pictures of young girls on the bikes doing triathlon with their little triathlon suits on their backside. So it was clear for me that they were doing something that was not very savoury. And just by approaching that individual had the effect that individual scarpered. And what we did then is we communicated that around with the radios, the walkie-talkies that we've got, just to describe what this individual looked like. And we recorded it down as well on our processes to make sure that we were very much aware that we'd done that. But also having a conversation as well, having a conversation with the venue, because this person might have been seen previously, and people might have had other previous concerns about an individual, about this individual. So just check in with the venue. You know, if you're in an outward bound centre or something, they might know of an individual that they might be worried about, and it might be in extreme cases that you might then want to raise that with the local police. And do you have Gaza in Northern Ireland? I don't know whether you do. But yeah, so it might be a case of having that conversation with your police to make sure, you know, if flag this up. And even, if it, here in England it'll be I was going to say 111, then that's the health 101. And having that conversation with them. So yeah, absolutely, Deirdre, I think that's fantastic. And what it's not even about big cameras nowadays. Phones can do so much. So think about your policy for when you're running events. What does your photography policy say? Do you want people to log things? Do you not? There's pluses and minuses around that type of thing. I've got mixed opinions about whether we get everybody to register devices or not. Do we give people wristbands to say that it's about what works for you? But I think it's about having something in your policy or procedure that means that you've got an ability to be able to raise this and follow a process so that somebody knows what to do if this happens in the future. So just a quick little one, really, just for us to think about, because I know it comes up so much in sport. Yeah, so as Nikki said the same thing about asking the individual, and it may be Anna says about it might be a relative of the child, and I think absolutely I wouldn't go in strong arms and just casually have that conversation. Oh, hi, you're here to the event, have you got anybody in the event, blah 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 blah. Have that conversation with somebody. But also what I started the session off with was about your well-being. So I wouldn't put yourself in a position where you feel like you could put yourself at risk. So maybe go with somebody else, or make somebody else aware of what you're going to be doing, and that to check in with you in a couple of minutes time to make sure that you're safe as well. So put your safety first as well. So Peter, I think that was me done there. Look at me keeping to time. I'm very impressed with myself.
I'm very impressed. You're very good. Oh, no, thank you for that. I should make some notes of going to, and I think it's really informative. And then as I'm going through, I'm thinking, I'm putting my club hat on as well as my British orienteering hat on, going, we do that, and it's reassuring to know that there's lots of things that are going on. I know there's still this sort of common misconception when we talk about safeguarding is all about sort of cases or the incidents and things like that, and it's not that. It's part of that, but it's so much more. And I think there's a couple of things on sort of with parent communications that we could do as a club, that like to obviously leave the children. We don't have many juniors, so it's not on a bigger scale as some of the other clubs that might have quite a bit more thought into it. But I certainly think there's things that we can just tighten up a little bit in how we handle that, looking through. But no,
And I
thanks,
think we
Stella.
should always be striving for just being better, shouldn't we?
Mm.
So I don't think, you know yourself, Peter, safeguarding's changed over the last, 10 years, from even before when you were in another NGB. Safeguarding has significantly changed, on the back of the gymnastics scandal. We're looking at different safeguarding concerns. So for me, if I think about a pie chart, safeguarding is probably a large slice of cake. 3/4 of a cake is safeguarding. That's the preventative side of things. So I always talk about front loading. So I always front load whenever we're talking about event safeguarding. Front load it as much as you can do. Put all the preventative stuff in place. And then that last quarter, and it might even be less than that actually, is when something happens. So that safety net is there, but you've got a policy, you've got a procedure, you know what to do. You can just pick up the manual. Other people in the club know what to do. They can open the book and go, right, this is what we need to do now. So people have had all of the training and stuff, but sometimes not sometimes, it is good to have something written down so that when crisis happens, you've got a manual to follow, because that's the time that you think, oh my gosh, I can't remember what we did on that training. So I just think just have a simple flow chart that you know what to do if you've got a missing child, or you've got a flow chart if we've got a concern. So you can just quickly look at it and refresh your memory and then think, right, this is what I need to do. This is when I need to spring into action.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a couple of minutes just to see if there's any sort of questions come through. I'll just go through a couple of updates I mentioned at the beginning, just to run through. I had 3 through here. You may remember, obviously last year I mentioned about sort of meetings with clubs and specific junior sessions. So if there are any clubs as well that have got so a good group of juniors that will be welcome for me to come along and just have a chat over a session just about safeguarding and such, then please do get in touch. I'm still looking for a couple of clubs for this year to link up for that. Coaching license is a big one that's coming up. It's been 3 years nearly now since the safeguarding element became part of the coaching license. So there will be, remember sort of this time 3 years ago, for those coaches that were around at that point that are on the call, there was lots of safeguarding courses that was provided with the tutor led. So you're due for the refresher. So there is some communications that will be going out in the next sort of 24 hours to coaches and clubs, just to outline what that refresher can be. So after the first 3 years, it was an e-learning module can be done. By all means, they can do the tutor-led courses. There are lots of people that work obviously within schools in them environments that will be doing safeguarding courses quite regular as well. So obviously we just need to see some evidence of them courses as well. But yeah, for those that don't have access to them, our e-learning module's been recently updated, so it's ready to go. That can be done at any point, and we do get that information to us once that's been completed. And the final thing was that as well, this time last year, I mentioned about websites and how they were really important to be one of them, that crucial link to find safeguarding information, and how at this time last year, so we hadn't provided any guidance to you guys about what you could include on your website and such. But what's really pleasing, we sent out the template, and I will share the update here. So this is where we are standing at the minute. So mentioned at the beginning of January, that's where we rated the club website content for safeguarding. You can see since then up to sort of January where we are at the minute. It's been an absolute massive turnaround, and real thank you for everyone for putting the effort in and getting them websites updated. We've still got a few clubs left to go, just to put the information up there, but we'll send that template around again as well, and we'll just chase up as well the others. But yeah, really important that information's there and it's accessible. So yeah, just a big thank you again for everybody's efforts on that. And I think there's a couple of points I see that Lisa just put into the chat through there as well. Got the slides. If it's okay, be okay to share them around, won't it, Lisa? Afterwards?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I know we've had a couple of people ask for the recording as well, so we'll get that sorted. A little bit of editing because we don't want our chitter chatter beforehand while we're going through the technical bits. But yeah, Joe will be on that, and that will be we'll have that out shortly. But no, from me, thank you very much, Lisa. I don't know if there's anything else to put through or any comments, Joe.
Just to sort of put out, I guess, a last little call out. If anybody does have any questions, that they can pop them in the chat. We'll give you a minute, of course, and I'm sure we can fill some little space with a bit of chitter chatter. You can also use I know some people are using the Q&A tab earlier, which is good to see. I know that it's some difficulties with the chat sometimes. So all people can raise their hands if they so wish. But I'll sort of carry on, and then if we do have any questions, I'll hop back to it. But just a big thank you to Lisa, and also to yourself, Peter, for both taking the time this evening, and to everybody who's attended. It's really good to have such a strong session on safeguarding, especially with how important it naturally is, of course, for all clubs and for all of us. Even the lowly ones of us who aren't running anything in clubs, but just turning up to the events, it goes all the way round. And it's been, we're halfway through this conference now. It's good to see the session still carrying on, going strong, and I'll look forward to editing this with a nice cuppa in the morning. Anything from you, Howard?
No, thanks very much for everyone, and fantastic presentation, really absorbing, fantastic information, and hopefully it's really helpful to all our clubs and members. Thanks everyone.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. I've had a really nice time. And poor Peter, I don't know whether he was expecting to be put on the spot a little bit. So apologies, Peter, and thank you very much for being my co-host.
I always like getting involved. No, I really enjoyed that one. Many thanks for that.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody that participated and put comments and just even listening as well, taking the time for obviously a busy evening. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Nikki's just put something in the chat, really positive. Thank you very much, Nikki.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki.
If anybody does have any questions that they wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, then I will pop in some links now. I'll pop in, so there's links to myself, Howard, and Peter's email addresses, and also some extra parts on where you can find the YouTube sessions for the 2024 conference. There's also going to be space on the feedback form, which you'll receive tomorrow with the video link, for any extra questions, and I'll get those passed over if we do have any more requests and get back to you in a week or two. I'll give everybody a bit of time, but if there's it doesn't look like there's any more questions, so thank you very much for everybody attending, and the next session coming up we will be having tomorrow evening at the same time, and that will be is a paid development officer appropriate for your club, with the Orienteering Foundation's input as well. So another one, and they'll keep on coming until the end of next week. But in that case, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Diolch, Anna.
Thanks.